The millionaire's daughter spoke again after years, all because of a homeless man. The mansion in Beverly Hills stood as a monument to Richard Davenport's success. Every slab of Italian marble, every crystal chandelier, every piece of art on the walls told the story of a man who had transformed concrete and steel into an empire. But no luxury, no fortune accumulated over 30 years of tireless work could buy what he desired most: to hear his own daughter's voice. Isabella was 9 years old and hadn't uttered a single sound in 4 years. In the mahogany-paneled library, Maria adjusted the flashcards on the oak table. The middle-aged housekeeper, her graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, watched the girl with a tenderness that went far beyond professional duty. Isabella sat in the upholstered chair, her small legs dangling without touching the floor, her enormous brown eyes fixed on the colorful illustrations. "Shall we try again, sweetie?" Maria pointed to the first card, a bright red apple. "This here is an—" Isabella looked at the card. Her lips moved slightly, but no sound emerged. She picked up a colored pencil and drew an apple on the paper in front of her, with clumsy but recognizable strokes. "Very good, Bella, but can you say the name?" Maria gently touched the girl's hand. "Just one little word?" Isabella's eyes filled with frustration. She shook her head, her brown hair falling across her face. She wrote in trembling letters, "I can't." Maria sighed, wiping away a tear before the girl could notice. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Richard Davenport entered the library like a storm contained in a $5,000 Italian suit. Tall, broad-shouldered, his graying hair impeccably styled, he radiated authority. At 52, he had built an empire that employed thousands. But in front of that table, he was just a desperate father. "Well?" His voice was deep, controlled. "Any progress?" Maria stood up, smoothing her apron. "Mr. Davenport, she's trying. Her drawings are getting better, and—" "Drawings?" Richard cut her off, his voice bitter. "I spent $50,000 on the best neurologist in LA. I brought in specialists from Johns Hopkins, from London. Maria, I don't need drawings. I need my daughter to speak." Isabella shrank in her chair, making herself small. "With all due respect, sir." Maria kept her voice steady. "Pressure isn't going to help. She needs time, patience." "Time?" Richard walked to the panoramic window that revealed the meticulously manicured garden. "It's been 4 years, Maria. 4 years since Marina—" He didn't finish the sentence. He never did. His wife's death was a wound that remained open, bleeding silently. Isabella picked up another card. She drew 2 figures, one large, one small. She wrote underneath, "Mom and me." Richard turned abruptly. He saw the drawing. His eyes glistened for a moment before he regained his composure. "Isabella." He knelt beside her chair, a rare gesture for a man who commanded boardrooms like a general on a battlefield. "You have to try. For me, for your mother. I would do anything to hear your voice again." The girl looked at her father. Her lips trembled. She wanted to speak. He could see it in her eyes. But the words remained trapped somewhere deep, inaccessible, as if an invisible wall were blocking them. She wrote, "Sorry, Dad." Richard stood up abruptly, his jaw tight. "I have a meeting on Rodeo Drive at 3. I'm taking Isabella with me. Maybe a change of scenery will help." "Sir, she doesn't like leaving the house," Maria protested. "And being locked up in this library is going to make her talk?" Richard was already in the hallway. "Get her ready, we're leaving in 20 minutes. As his footsteps faded, Maria stroked Isabella's hair. "Your father loves you very much, you know. He just doesn't know how to show it well." Isabella wrote a single word. "I know." 20 minutes later, the black Mercedes glided through the streets of Los Angeles. In the back seat, Isabella watched the city through the tinted window. Maria sat beside her, holding her small hand. Richard drove in silence, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the traffic. The city transformed around them. The luxury estates of Beverly Hills gave way to the glass skyscrapers of Century City, then to the bustling streets of downtown. Street vendors, hurried pedestrians, the organized chaos of LA. At a traffic light on Sunset Boulevard, the car stopped, and that's when Isabella saw him. A man on the sidewalk, sitting on a worn piece of cardboard, a scruffy beard, clothes that were once blue but were now just faded patches, an old cap protecting his face from the sun. Beside him, a piece of cardboard with shaky letters. "Hungry? Anything helps." But it wasn't the worn clothes or the sign that captured Isabella's attention. It was his eyes. When the man lifted his face and their gazes met through the tinted glass, Isabella felt something awaken inside her. His eyes were warm, kind, without judgment. He smiled at her, a genuine smile that completely transformed his tired face. And then he waved. Not a casual wave, but something delicate, almost reverent. His lips moved. Isabella couldn't hear through the glass, but she read them perfectly. "Hello, little glass princess." Her heart soared. Her hands tapped on the window, her small fingers spread against the glass. She turned to Maria, then to her father, her eyes huge, shining with something that hadn't appeared there in 4 years. "Will." "Isabella, what's wrong?" Maria noticed the change immediately, but the light turned green. Richard accelerated, ignoring the commotion in the back seat. "Dad!" Isabella gestured frantically, pointing behind them. "No, Isabella, we have to go." Richard didn't even look in the rearview mirror. She hit the window again, harder. She turned, trying to see the man through the rear window as the car pulled away. He was still there, waving until he disappeared into the crowd. Maria held Isabella's hand, feeling it tremble. "Who was that, dear? Do you know that man?" Isabella shook her head, but her fingers were already searching for the sketchbook she always carried. For the entire ride to the office, while Richard talked on the phone about contracts and developments, she drew a man with a beard, a cap, kind eyes, and herself small beside him. Maria watched, intrigued and hopeful. For the first time in 4 years, Isabella Davenport seemed truly alive. The following days were different. Isabella remained mute, but something had changed in her. Maria could see it in the girl's eyes, in the way she looked out the window, as if waiting to see something or someone. The sketchbook filled with drawings of the same man. Always the cap, always the beard, always those eyes she tried to capture with colored pencils, making them warm even on paper. "Who is he, Bella?" Maria asked the 5th time she found her drawing the same figure. Isabella wrote carefully, "I don't know, but he saw me." It was a strange answer. Doctors had examined Isabella. Renowned therapists had spent hours with her. The elite of Los Angeles knew the tragedy of the young Davenport girl, the child who lost her voice when she lost her mother. They all saw her, but none of them truly saw her. That man on the street, in 30 seconds, had achieved what years of treatment could not. He had awakened something in her. Richard didn't understand. "He's just a homeless man, Isabella. There are thousands of them in the city." He flipped through the sketchbook with disapproval. "Maria, I need you to distract my daughter with more appropriate things." "With all due respect, Mr. Davenport," Maria crossed her arms. "For the first time in years, she's interested in something. Isn't that appropriate? Interest in a homeless man?" Richard threw the sketchbook on the table. "No, that's inappropriate. My daughter is not going to get obsessed with a sound interrupted him. Low, almost inaudible, but unmistakable. A whimper had escaped Isabella. It wasn't a word, it wasn't speech, but it was a sound that had come from her throat for the first time since she was 5. Richard froze. Maria covered her mouth with her hands. Isabella looked at her father, her eyes defiant, and pointed to the drawing of the man. You made a sound," Richard whispered, approaching slowly, as if she were a bird about to take flight. Isabella picked up her pencil. She wrote in large, shaky letters, "I want to see him again." Richard's heart both broke and filled with anger simultaneously. His daughter was showing will, showing emotion, making sounds, but not for him, for a stranger on the street. "No," he said, his voice harder than he intended. "Absolutely not." Isabella threw the pencil on the floor. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. Instead, she wrote furiously, "Why? Because I'm your father and I know what's best for you." The girl tore the page from the sketchbook, crumpled it, and threw it at her father. Then she ran out of the library, leaving Richard and Maria in a tense silence. "Sir?" Maria began cautiously. "No, Maria." Richard massaged his temples. "I'm not going to entertain this fantasy. She needs professional help, not this." But that night, while Richard worked late in his office, Maria went up to Isabella's room. The girl was awake, lying on her side, clutching her sketchbook. Maria sat on the edge of the bed. "Can I tell you a secret?" Isabella turned, curious. "When I was a little girl about your age, I had something that scared me too. I couldn't read out loud in school. The words would get stuck in my mouth." Maria smiled sadly. "All the teachers tried to help. My mother took me to doctors. But do you know who really helped me?" Isabella shook her head. "My grandmother, a simple woman who could barely write her own name. She didn't try to force me. She just listened to me. She let me try at my own pace." Maria stroked the girl's hair. "Sometimes the simplest people have the greatest power to heal." Isabella wrote, "Like the man on the street?" "Just like him," Maria nodded. Bella, your father is scared. He loves you so much that he's afraid of losing you again, like he lost your mother. Fear makes people make bad decisions sometimes. The girl thought for a moment, then wrote, Will you take me to see him? Maria took a deep breath. She could lose her job. Richard Davenport was not a man who tolerated disobedience, but when she looked into those huge brown eyes, filled with hope, she knew she had no choice. Your father is traveling to New York on Friday. Business meeting. Maria held Isabella's small hand. If you promise not to tell him, we can take a little trip downtown. Isabella practically leaped out of bed and hugged Maria tightly. For the first time in 4 years, she truly smiled. Friday arrived shrouded in a morning haze. Richard left for LAX at 6 a.m., impeccable in his grey suit, leather briefcase in hand. He kissed Isabella's forehead, who was still in her pajamas, and said the same words as always, Be a good girl. Listen to Maria. Isabella nodded, holding back the anxiety that was bubbling inside her. By 9 a.m., she and Maria were in a yellow cab heading down the 405. The city revealed itself differently from inside that modest car, without tinted windows, without a barrier between her and the real world. Isabella pressed her nose against the window, taking everything in, the crowded buses, the motorcycles weaving through traffic, the street vendors on the corners. Do you remember where you saw him? Maria asked. Isabella nodded vigorously and pointed forward, as if she had memorized every turn in the road. Sunset Boulevard was teeming with life. Vintage clothing stores next to art galleries, corner restaurants exhaling the smell of fresh food, young people on skateboards, hurried executives. And there, on the same sidewalk where she had first seen him, sat John. Isabella's heart leaped. She grabbed Maria's arm. Is that him? Maria asked unnecessarily. The girl's reaction was answer enough. They got out of the cab. Isabella held Maria's hand tightly as they approached. John was reading a tattered book, his lips moving silently as he traced the words. When he noticed the shadows over him, he looked up, and he smiled. The same warm smile Isabella had kept in her memory for days. Hello, little glass princess, he said, his voice raspy but kind. You came back. Isabella let go of Maria's hand and stepped closer. Her fingers trembled as she opened her sketchbook and showed him all the drawings she had made. One after another, pages filled with him. John examined each drawing with reverent attention. You draw very well. Look at that, you even captured my crooked cap. He chuckled, touching the worn brim. And these eyes here, are they really mine? Are they that nice? Isabella nodded, serious. She picked up her pencil and wrote, Are you my friend? John read the question and something in his face changed. A deep emotion passed through his tired eyes. I would be honored to be your friend, little princess. What's your name? Isabella wrote, Isabella, I don't talk. That's okay. There are many ways to say things. John pointed to the drawings. You're speaking to me through these beautiful pictures. That's worth more than 1,000 words. He extended his hand respectfully. I'm John. I've been living here for a couple of years. I'm glad you came to visit me. Maria watched the interaction, moved. There was something about that man, in his absolute simplicity, in his non-judgmental acceptance that was pure magic. Isabella sat next to him on the cardboard, completely oblivious to the dirt, the stains, what her father would say. John picked up a piece of chalk he used to draw on the sidewalk, his way of entertaining pedestrians and maybe earning a few coins. Can I show you something? He asked. Isabella nodded. John drew on the sidewalk. A sun, a flower, a bird. Then he pointed to the sun. Sun, he said clearly. He pointed to Isabella, inviting her. She pointed to the sun. That's it. Now the flower. He pointed to it. Isabella pointed to the flower. Beautiful. And the little bird. Isabella pointed to it, and then something extraordinary happened. Her lips moved. No sound came out, but she silently formed the word. Bird. John saw it. He didn't make a fuss. He didn't pressure her. He just smiled, proud. You're very smart, Isabella. Maria had to turn away for a moment, pretending to look at a shop window to hide her tears. They spent 2 hours there. John told stories about the time he worked on a farm in the Midwest, about a mutt who was his companion for years, about the stars he could sometimes see, even with LA's light pollution. Isabella listened to it all, absorbing every word, every gesture. When Maria gently said they had to leave, Isabella wrote frantically, Can I come back? I'm always here, little princess, John replied. This is my home. He pointed to the piece of sidewalk with self-deprecating humor. Isabella then did something that surprised even Maria. She tore the page with her favorite drawing of John from her sketchbook and handed it to him. "For me?" John held the paper as if it were a treasure. "I'll keep this safe. Thank you, Isabella." She nodded, serious, and then raised her hand in a wave goodbye. In the cab on the way back, Maria noticed Isabella was writing something. When the girl showed it to her, her heart swelled. It said, "Hello," the same word John had said. And below it, in smaller, shaky letters, "John is good." Richard returned from New York on Sunday night, carrying 3 new contracts and the weight of the world on his shoulders. He found Isabella in the library, drawing as usual, and Maria preparing dinner. "How has she been?" he asked, kissing his daughter's forehead. "An angel, as always," Maria replied, avoiding his gaze. What she didn't say was how Isabella had changed, how her drawings now had more life, more color, how she had tried to form words with her lips in the bathroom mirror, how she had written a list of simple words, "Hello, Sunflower John." Isabella had hidden that list between the pages of a picture book. It was her and Maria's secret. The following weeks were a delicate balance. Richard immersed himself in a new project, a residential tower complex in downtown LA that required his full attention. He left early, came home late. And in those gaps, Maria took Isabella to visit John. Twice a week, always on different days to avoid creating a pattern, they took a cab to Sunset Boulevard. Isabella started bringing a small backpack with snacks. Sandwiches she asked Maria to prepare, fruit, juice. For John, she communicated through her gestures. For her friend, John never asked for anything. He accepted with humble gratitude, always sharing half with Isabella, insisting that friends share everything. It was during the 5th visit that it happened. Isabella was sitting next to John, both drawing on the sidewalk with colored chalk she had brought him as a gift. He was drawing a simple house. She, a mansion with towers and gardens. "Is that your house?" John asked, admiring the details she managed to capture. Isabella nodded, then pointed at him inquisitively. "My house is this." John patted the cardboard affectionately. "It's not much, but it's mine. The sky is my roof, the stars are my decorations." He smiled, but there was melancholy there. "I had another house many years ago. Family, a job, everything in order. But life sometimes takes everything away from you at once." Isabella touched his arm, comforting him in the only way she knew how. "But that's okay," John continued, "because now I have a friend, a little princess who comes to visit and brings me delicious sandwiches." He winked at her. And then he asked the question that would change everything. "Isabella, why don't you talk? Did something happen?" The girl froze. Maria, sitting on a nearby bench, tensed up. Isabella slowly picked up her notebook. She wrote, the letters shakier than usual. "My mom died, I was 5, I can't since then." John read it, and his expression filled with a deep understanding. "Oh, little one, I'm so sorry." He didn't try to hug her, respecting her space. "Sometimes we lose things so big that it feels like we lose a piece of ourselves too. Is that it?" Isabella nodded, silent tears streaming down her face. "But you know what I think?" John pointed to his heart. "Your voice is in here. It's just hiding because it's scared. It's afraid that if it comes out it will hurt again. But someday when you're ready, it will want to come out. And when that happens, it will be because you decided, not because someone ordered you to. You decide, Isabella. Always you." She looked at him with those immense eyes, and, for the first time since she'd known John, she truly tried to speak. Her lips moved. A tiny, almost imperceptible sound emerged from her throat. "Yee." Maria stood up from the bench, her heart racing. John remained calm, encouraging. "You can try. No rush." Yes." Isabella forced it, her face red with effort. "You can do it, little princess." "Yes." The word came out. Low, raspy, almost a whisper, but clear. "Yes." The silence that followed was breathtaking. Maria covered her mouth, tears flowing freely. John smiled, his own eyes shining. "You spoke," he said softly. "Did you hear that? You spoke, Isabella." The girl touched her throat, both frightened and amazed. She tried again. Yes." The word came out easier this time. Maria ran to her, hugging her. "Oh my God, Bella, you spoke!" Isabella looked at John, seeking confirmation that this was real. "It's real," he said, as if reading her mind. "And it's just the beginning. But remember, you don't have to force it. When you're ready for more words, they'll come. Your time, your voice, your choice." On the way back, Isabella remained silent, processing. But when Maria tucked her in that night, the girl whispered, testing her new ability, "Yes, yes, yes." And then, clutching the sketchbook where she kept the mental image of John, she whispered a new word, "friend." Richard found out 3 days later. He came home earlier than expected. A cancelled meeting had given him the afternoon off. He found Isabella in the library, but something was different. She was muttering something so low it was barely audible, but her lips were clearly moving. He froze in the doorway. "Isabella?" The girl turned, startled. Her eyes widened when she saw her father. Richard entered slowly, almost holding his breath. Were you talking?" Isabella shook her head quickly, but it was an obvious lie. "Don't lie to me." He knelt beside her. "I heard you. You were saying something." Hope and desperation mingled in his voice. "Say it again. Say anything. Dad. Say, Dad." "Isabella." She backed away, pressing herself against the chair. "Please." Richard held her gently by the shoulders. "It's been 4 years. 4 years waiting to hear your voice, just one word. A single word for me." Isabella looked at him, and Richard saw something in her eyes that chilled him to the bone. Pity. His daughter felt sorry for him. She picked up the notebook and wrote, "I can't." "But I heard you. You were talking to yourself just a moment ago." "Practicing," she wrote. "Practicing?" Richard let her go, confused. Practicing for what? For whom? That's when he saw the drawings. Pages and pages of the same man. And under the most recent one, a word written in careful letters. John. The realization hit Richard like a punch to the gut. The homeless man. His voice came out dangerously low. "You're still thinking about the homeless man on the street?" Isabella nodded, defiant. "Maria!" Richard roared. The housekeeper appeared in the doorway, pale. She knew. By the way she avoided his gaze, she knew exactly what was coming. "Did you take my daughter to see that man?" Every word was an accusation. Maria straightened her shoulders. "I did." "How dare you? How dare you disobey a direct order?" "She asked me to," Maria interrupted bravely. "She begged me, Mr. Davenport. And you know what else? It worked. She's talking." "Liar." "It's not a lie. She said yes to John. She said friend. She's practicing words every day." Maria took a step forward. "That man achieved in weeks what thousands of dollars in therapy couldn't achieve in years." Richard turned to Isabella. "Is that true?" The girl nodded. "Then talk to me. Now. Prove you can." Isabella shook her head. "Why?" Richard's voice broke. "Why him and not me?" Isabella picked up the pencil with trembling hands and wrote slowly, each letter a stab to her father's heart. "Because he listens to me." Dinner that night was tense. Richard had ordered Maria to set the table in the formal dining room, something they rarely used. The gleaming mahogany table could seat 12, but only 2 place settings were laid out, one opposite the other. Richard at the head, Isabella at the other end, small and distant. Maria served the food in silence and left. "Do you know how much I've spent trying to get you to talk?" Richard cut his steak with surgical precision. "Over $150,000. Doctors from all over the world, and you choose to talk to a homeless man who doesn't even have a place to sleep." Isabella stared at her plate. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." She raised her eyes, defiant. "You are going to stop seeing that man. I will give Maria clear orders, no leaving the house without my permission, and I will hire a personal driver who will only take you where I authorize." Isabella pushed her plate away. "Eat." She shook her head. "Isabella Davenport, I told you to eat." The girl stood up from her chair. "Sit down." She walked towards the door. Richard slammed his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. "I am your father. You will obey me." Isabella stopped. She turned. And then, for the first time in 4 years, she directed words at her father. "I want to see him." The voice was low, raspy from disuse, but crystal clear. Each syllable formed with deliberate effort. Richard was paralyzed. You spoke." He stood up, his legs weak. "Isabella, you spoke to me." "I want to see him," she repeated, more firmly. Tears streamed down Richard's face. He took a step towards his daughter, his arms outstretched, ready to embrace her, to cling to this moment of victory. But Isabella stepped back. "No," she said. "I want to see John." And then she walked out of the room, leaving Richard alone with his bitter victory. He had heard his daughter's voice for the first time in years, but she hadn't spoken out of love. She had spoken out of defiance. That night, Richard stayed up in his office until dawn, an untouched glass of whiskey beside him, staring at the framed photo of Marina. "She's talking," he whispered to his wife's frozen image. But not to me. Never to me. The photo didn't answer, but Richard felt the weight of judgment all the same. Monday dawned grim. Richard summoned Maria to his office before 6 a.m. I need you to do something for me. If it's about Isabella and John, it's exactly about that. Richard slid an envelope across the desk. Here's $5,000. I want you to find that John and offer it to him. It's more than he probably sees in a year. Tell him to leave, to move to another city, to stay away from my daughter. Maria looked at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. I won't do it. It's not a request. Then I resign. Maria looked him in the eye. I'm not going to destroy the progress Isabella is making just because you're jealous. Jealous? Richard stood up, furious. This isn't jealousy, it's protection. That man is a stranger, a homeless person who could be anyone. He's a kind man who sees your daughter as a person, not as a broken project that needs to be fixed. The silence that followed was sharp. Richard took a deep breath. You're fired. No, came a voice from the doorway. They both turned. Isabella stood there, still in her pajamas, her eyes red from crying. No, she repeated louder. Maria stays. Richard opened his mouth to argue, but the expression on his daughter's face silenced him. Fine, he said finally. Maria stays. But you will not see that John again. That is non-negotiable. No, Isabella said for the third time. Isabella, I am going to see John. Each word came out with absolute determination. Richard picked up the phone. Then I'll do it my way. 3 hours later, 2 burly security guards found John in his usual spot on Sunset Boulevard. He was drawing a sunset on the sidewalk with chalk, his sign propped against the wall. John? The bigger one asked. Yes? John looked up, shielding his eyes from the sun. You need to come with us. Have I done something wrong? Just come with us. They took him to a nearby alley, away from prying eyes. The bigger one pulled an envelope from his pocket. $10,000. All yours. You just have to do one thing. John looked at the money without reaching for it. What's that? Disappear. Go to another city. Stop talking to the girl. Understanding crossed John's face. Isabella. It doesn't matter what her name is. What matters is that you take the money and go. John shook his head slowly. No. The smaller one grabbed him by the collar of his tattered shirt. Listen here, you. I said no. John remained calm, but firm. You can hit me. You can threaten me. I'm not going to take money to abandon a child who trusts me. That's not for sale. You're a homeless man with nothing. This money could change your life. My life doesn't need to be changed, and it certainly doesn't need to be bought. John gently removed the man's hand. Tell her father that if Isabella wants to see me, I'll be here. I won't seek her out, but I won't leave either. This is between him and his daughter. The security guards exchanged glances. They hadn't expected this reaction. You'll regret this, the bigger one threatened. Maybe, but I'll sleep peacefully. When Richard received the call informing him that John had refused the money, he smashed the phone against the wall. Isabella, who had heard everything through the slightly ajar office door, felt something awaken inside her. John had chosen her over the money. He had chosen their friendship over what could have been his salvation. She ran to her room, locked the door, and for the first time in 4 years, she opened her mouth and screamed. No! The word echoed throughout the mansion. Maria ran upstairs. Richard arrived right behind her. Isabella! He banged on the door. Open this door. No! She yelled from inside. Don't touch him. Don't take him away from me. Richard froze. It wasn't just that she was talking. It was what she was saying. Complete sentences. Her voice steady even through the tears. Honey, please open the door. We can talk. You tried to buy him. The words came out choked, but clear. He's my friend. My only friend. You have everything. You have this house. You have toys. I have nothing. The scream was louder than all the previous ones. I don't have a mother. I don't have you. You're never here. And when you are, you just want me to be what you want, not who I am. Richard rested his forehead against the door, defeated. Every word from Isabella was a truth he didn't want to face. He's gone, Richard lied. John took the money and left. Silence from the other side. Isabella? When she answered, her voice was broken. Liar. John wouldn't do that. And Richard realized she was right. John hadn't. But Isabella would no longer believe anything he said. The trust between father and daughter, already fragile, was destroyed. That night, Isabella murmured in the darkness of her room, testing the words, strengthening her newfound voice. He'll be back. He'll be back. He promised. And even through the walls, Richard heard her. For the first time, he wondered if he was doing the right thing. Dawn arrived with a dense fog over Beverly Hills. Isabella woke up at 5 a.m., dressed silently, and filled a small backpack with water, cookies, and the $10 she kept from her allowance. She was going to find John, with or without permission. She crept down the marble staircase without a sound, stepping only on the edges where the wood didn't creak. Maria had unintentionally taught her that years ago, when they played hide-and-seek. The night security guard was in the main guardhouse. Isabella knew the routine. He made rounds every hour. She waited, hidden behind the garden fountain, until she saw him pass, then ran for the side gate. Her small hands struggled with the lock when a voice stopped her. "Miss Isabella." She froze. The guard was behind her, confused. "What are you doing up at this hour?" Isabella turned, her eyes determined. For the first time, she used her voice for something more than a desperate scream. She spoke low but firm. "John? What?" "I need to see John." Each word was an effort, but she forced herself. "My friend. Miss, I can't let you go out alone. It's dangerous. And your father, please." Isabella clasped her hands, pleading. "Please." The guard, a 50-year-old man with 3 daughters of his own, felt his heart ache. But orders were orders. "I'll have to call your father." Isabella tried to run, but he gently held her by the arm, not hurting her, just stopping her. That's when Richard appeared on the porch, alerted by the security system that had detected movement in the garden. He was in a bathrobe, his hair disheveled, a rare sight of the tycoon out of control. "Isabella." He came down the steps 2 at a time. "What do you think you're doing?" "Going to see John." She faced her father without fear. "At 5 in the morning, alone. You're 9 years old." "I don't care." The words came easier now, anger lubricating her throat. "You won't let me see him, so I will go alone." Richard scooped her into his arms, ignoring the small fists she rained down on his chest. "Let me go," Isabella spelled out, punching with each syllable. "Let me see him. I'm not going to let you put yourself in danger for a—" "He's not dangerous." The scream came out cleaner than any word before. You are the one who hurts me." "Not John." Richard almost dropped her from the shock of the accusation. "I have never hurt you," he whispered. "Yes." Tears streamed down Isabella's face, but she kept her eyes fixed on him. "Every day. It hurts when you ignore me. It hurts when you don't listen. It hurts when you push away the people I love." The words, still halting and imperfect, wounded Richard more deeply than any articulate argument ever could have. He carried his daughter back inside, ignoring her protests. He locked her in her room from the outside, something he had never done before, but he was desperate. "When you calm down, we'll talk," he said through the solid wood door. Inside, Isabella pounded on the door until her knuckles ached. She screamed until she was hoarse. Then, exhausted, she slid to the floor and cried. Maria found Richard an hour later in the office, his head in his hands. "Mr. Davenport, locking her in her room is not the solution. What do you want me to do?" He raised his red-rimmed eyes. "She tried to run away, Maria. Run away. A 9-year-old girl trying to cross LA alone to find a homeless man. How am I the villain in this story? Because you're fighting against her instead of fighting for her. I'm protecting her. You're controlling her. It's different." Maria sat down, uninvited. "Sir, I'm going to tell you something that might hurt. When Mrs. Marina died, you built a gilded cage around Isabella. You thought money, doctors, security, all of it would keep her safe. But she doesn't need a cage. She needs freedom, choices, to be seen." "John sees her?" "Yes. He sees a brave little girl trying to find her voice. He doesn't see a tragedy, a problem to be solved. He sees Isabella." Maria stood up. "And until you see her that way too, she'll keep trying to escape, not from the mansion. From you." Richard was left alone with Maria's words echoing in his mind. Upstairs, Isabella had stopped crying. She was writing, page after page, practicing the words she wanted to say when, not if, she saw John again. "I tried to get to you. My dad wouldn't let me. But I'm not giving up. I'll never give up. You taught me my voice, my choice. I choose you. I choose to talk. I choose to fight." Maria went up with a breakfast tray and found the door still locked. "Bella, can I come in?" Silence. "I brought your favorite pancakes." The lock turned on the other side. Richard had left the key in the lock. Isabella had opened it from inside. The girl was sitting on the bed, surrounded by scribbled papers, her eyes swollen but determined. "Will you help me?" she asked Maria. "Again?" Maria glanced towards the door, towards the hallways where Richard could appear at any moment. She looked at Isabella, at those eyes that seemed much older than a 9-year-old's should. "Yes," she promised, "but we need a better plan. It can't be in secret forever. Your father has to understand." "He'll never understand. Then we'll make him see he has no other choice." Maria smiled conspiratorially. "But first, you eat those pancakes. No revolutions on an empty stomach." For the first time since her escape attempt, Isabella smiled. It took 2 days of careful negotiation. Maria waited for the right moment. When Richard was immersed in a crisis with suppliers, his attention completely absorbed, to casually suggest, "Sir, Isabella needs to get out for a bit. She's wilting inside the house. Then take her to the mall. She wants to go downtown to the Getty Museum. I thought it would be educational." Richard barely looked up from the contracts. "Fine, but be back before dinner." Maria felt a pang of guilt but pushed it aside. She was doing the right thing. The cab dropped them on Sunset Boulevard at 2 in the afternoon. Isabella practically flew out of the car when she spotted John in his usual spot, now with a new piece of cardboard and a slightly more worn sign. "John!" Her voice came out clear, joyful. He looked up, and the smile that lit up his face was genuine. "Little princess, you came back." Isabella didn't wait. She ran and hugged him with a force that belied her small frame. John laughed, wrapping her in a safe embrace. "I looked for you," Isabella said against his shoulder, her words still slow but increasingly fluid. "Every day. Dad tried to keep you away." "I know." John gently pulled her back to look at her. "Some men came to offer me money, but I'm not going anywhere, remember? This is my home." "You stayed for me?" "I stayed because I wanted to, and because a very special little princess needs a friend." He smoothed her hair. "And you? You're speaking so well, can I hear more?" Isabella beamed with pride. "I've practiced, every day, in the mirror." She pulled her notebook from her backpack. "I wrote the words for you." John read each page with reverent attention. Isabella had written lists. "Good morning, good afternoon, hello, goodbye, thank you, please, John, friend, home, sky, star, mother, father. Look how many words you know already. You're so smart, Isabella. John, will you teach me more?" "Of course, how about we play a game?" He picked up the chalk. He drew a star on the sidewalk. "Stay R. Let's try it together. Star, Isabella imitated. R, she clapped. Star, R. Perfect, now you." He pointed at her. "Me? Who are you?" "Isa," she began, concentrating. "Isa-Bella, beautiful. And me. John." They spent the whole afternoon like that. John had turned learning into a game, each word a small victory. Passers-by sometimes stopped to watch the unusual scene, a clearly wealthy child in designer clothes, sitting on the dirty ground next to a homeless man, both laughing as they practiced syllables. "Look," John pointed to the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear in the twilight. "When you feel lonely or sad, look at the stars. I'll be looking at the same stars. That way we're never really far apart. You are my best friend," Isabella said, pronouncing each word carefully. "And you're mine, little princess." She took her pencil and wrote something new in her notebook. She showed it to him. "John gave me my voice." John read it and had to blink several times to hold back the emotion. "No, little one, I just held the flashlight. You found the door and decided to open it. The voice was always yours." When Maria said they had to leave, Isabella hugged John for a long time. "Next week?" she asked hopefully. "I'll be here." In the cab on the way back, Isabella practiced more words. "Mom, She looked at Maria. "I remember her voice. She sang to me before sleep." Maria squeezed her hand, moved. "One day, I'll tell her about him, about talking again. Will she be happy? She would be so proud of you," Maria assured her. When they arrived at the mansion, Richard was in the foyer, arms crossed. "How was the museum?" Isabella looked at Maria, then at her father. She took a deep breath and said, "We didn't go to the museum." Richard raised his eyebrows. "No. We went to see John. Maria took me because I asked her to." The silence that followed was tense. Maria braced herself for certain dismissal, but Richard simply said, "Go to your room, Isabella. Maria, can we talk?" Isabella squeezed Maria's hand in encouragement before heading upstairs. "Sir," Maria began. "Stop." Richard held up a hand. He walked to the window, his back to her. "She's talking." "Yes, sir. Complete sentences. Choosing words. expressing feelings. Yes, because of him. Because of her. John just created a safe space. Richard turned. There was defeat in his eyes, but also something new. Surrender. I don't know how to be that kind of father, the kind she needs. Then learn, Maria said simply, before it's too late. Richard didn't sleep. At 3 a.m, he was in Isabella's room watching her sleep, the sketchbook fallen beside the bed. He picked it up carefully. Page after page, John. But not just that. There were new drawings. Her and John reading together, drawing together, looking at the stars together. And on the last page, the sentence that destroyed him. John gave me my voice. He sat in the chair by the bed, the notebook trembling in his hands. A homeless man had done what Harvard-trained doctors couldn't. A man with nothing had given his daughter everything. When Isabella woke up at dawn, she found her father there, the notebook open on his lap. Dad? Her voice was frightened. Do you believe this? Richard pointed to the sentence. That he gave you your voice. Isabella sat up, defensive. I do. And me? All the doctors, all the therapies I paid for, everything I did. Does none of that count? You tried, but we're trying to fix me. John, just listen to me. I have always listened to you. No. Isabella surprised them both with the force of the word. You heard what you wanted to hear. John heard my silence. Richard opened his mouth to argue, but was interrupted by Maria knocking at the door. Mr. Davenport, excuse me, but Isabella has a doctor's appointment at 9. She stopped when she saw the scene. Cancel it, Richard said. Sir, cancel all the doctors. All the therapies. He stood up, leaving the notebook on the nightstand. Obviously it's not working. Richard, Maria rarely used his first name, but the situation required it. No, it's fine. I clearly don't know what I'm doing. A homeless man knows more about taking care of my daughter than I do. There was bitterness, but also a truth he was finally beginning to accept. Dad, Isabella said quietly, you can try to listen, like John. How? I don't know how to be like him. You don't have to be, you just have to see me, for real. Richard looked at his daughter, really looked at her. He saw a 9-year-old girl who had lost her mother, who fought every day to find her words, who had chosen to trust a stranger because he had offered her something simple, acceptance. What do you want? He asked, and this time it wasn't an order. It was a genuine question. I want to see John, without hiding, without lying. And if I say no, I'll keep trying, always. The determination in those brown eyes was unshakable. Richard sighed deeply. Then I suppose I need to meet this John, for real this time. Isabella jumped out of bed and hugged her father so tightly she almost knocked him over. Thank you, Dad. It was the first time in years she had called him that. At 10 a.m, the black Mercedes parked on Sunset Boulevard. Richard got out, ignoring the curious stares. He wore a suit as always, out of place among the casually dressed pedestrians. John was in his usual spot, organizing his few belongings in a plastic bag. John? Richard stopped 10 feet away. The man looked up. He recognized him immediately. Impossible to forget the face Isabella drew with such dedication. Mr. Davenport, John greeted without getting up. I need to talk to you. About Isabella. About everything. Richard looked around. Is there somewhere we can... Here is fine, John interrupted kindly. This is my home, and I have nothing to hide. Richard blinked, surprised. He was used to controlling environments, conversations, but this man, sitting on the ground, had a dignity that no luxury office could lend him. Slowly, Richard sat on the cardboard next to John. He felt the rough texture through his expensive suit, the hardness of the concrete. Executives walked by, some taking a second look as they recognized him. My daughter is talking because of you, Richard said finally. Your daughter is talking because she decided to. I was just there when she decided to try. I spent fortunes, doctors from the best hospitals in the world, and you, in weeks. I did one thing they didn't. Nothing. John smiled sadly. I didn't try to fix her. I didn't treat her like a project. I just was her friend. Is it that simple? Sometimes it is. John looked at the sky. Mr. Davenport, you filled her world with doctors and expensive toys, but never with what she needed most, someone to listen to her, to accept her silence without trying to fill it. Richard felt the words like punches. She says I don't listen to her. And is she right? Silence. I love her, Richard said, his voice cracking. More than anything. I know. But love without listening is a gilded cage, and birds even in golden cages want to fly. Richard looked at the man beside him, tattered clothes, scruffy beard with nothing of material value. But there was wisdom there, born from a life Richard would never know. "What do you want from me?" Richard asked. "From Isabella." "Money?" John chuckled softly. "They already tried offering me that. I don't want your money. I don't want anything. Everybody wants something. I want Isabella to be happy. That's all." John looked at him directly. "And you, what do you want?" Richard thought. He really thought. "I want her to be the girl she was before Marina died. I want to hear her voice, her laughter. I want my daughter back. She never left. You were the one who stopped looking in the right places." John stood up, extending a hand to help Richard. "Isabella doesn't need to go back to who she was. She needs space to become who she is becoming." Richard took the hand, getting up. The contrast was absurd, an Italian suit holding the calloused hand of a homeless man, but in that moment it was also profoundly human. "I don't know how to do that," Richard admitted. "Then let her teach you. Children are good at teaching adults how to see the world again." John smiled. "And if you want me out of her life, Mr. Davenport, you'll have to ask her. It's not my choice to make. It's hers." Richard returned to the car, but he wasn't the same man who had left it. For the first time in years, he wondered if being the richest man in the room meant being the wisest. In the following days, Richard watched. He didn't control. He didn't interfere. He just watched. He saw Isabella practicing words in the mirror. He saw the drawings she made of John, each one more detailed than the last. He saw how she smiled when Maria mentioned a trip downtown. And he saw, most importantly, how she would murmur "Dad" when she saw him arrive, but never came close to hug him. The distance between them was small in feet, but infinite in connection. It was Isabella who finally built the bridge. On Thursday, during dinner, she said, "Dad, do you want to meet John?" Richard nearly choked on his wine. "What? For real? This time? Not to offer money? To get to know him? Isabella, please." She clasped her hands. "It's important to me." Maria, serving dessert, froze. Richard looked at his daughter. He saw hope there, but also determination. If he said no, he would lose another piece of her. "All right," he nodded. "On Saturday. We can have lunch together." "Here?" Isabella lit up. "Wherever you want. Here, at home. So he can see where I live." And so it was that on Saturday, John found himself in a surreal situation, walking through the gates of a mansion in Beverly Hills, following a butler to the most luxurious living room he had ever seen. Isabella ran to hug him as soon as she saw him, completely ignoring that he wore the same worn clothes as always. "John, you came. I wouldn't miss it for the world, little princess." He looked around, impressed. "So, this is where you live?" "It's too big," she admitted. "Sometimes I feel small." Richard entered, also dressed casually for the first time, jeans and a polo shirt, a clumsy attempt to seem less intimidating. "John," he greeted, extending his hand. "Mr. Davenport." John accepted the handshake, firm but respectful. The meal was initially tense. Maria had served a roast chicken and salads, comfort food she hoped would soften the atmosphere. Isabella sat between the two men, a literal and figurative intermediary. "How many rooms does it have?" John asked, trying to make conversation. 12, Richard replied. 3 suites, an office, a library, a living room, a dining room, kitchen, laundry, pantry, gym. And only you two live here. And Maria. She has a room in the back. John nodded, no judgment in his voice when he said, "It must be very quiet." Richard understood the subtext. A big house, empty of life. "John lives on the street," Isabella explained to her father. "But he has the stars. And stories. Lots of stories. Is that right?" Richard asked, genuinely curious for the first time. John smiled. "Stories are all I have. I can lose my belongings, but the memories stay." "Tell the one about the dog," Isabella requested, animated. And John told it. About Rex, a mutt who accompanied him for 3 years, who slept curled up against him on cold nights, who died of old age in his arms one winter morning. Richard saw tears in his daughter's eyes. She was feeling empathy, emotion, things he thought her silence had stolen from her. "Did you cry?" Isabella asked John. "I cried a lot, but then I understood. I had 3 years with my best friend. A lot of people go their whole lives without that." John looked meaningfully at Richard. Time isn't measured in quantity, but in quality. After lunch, Isabella dragged John off to see her room. Richard followed at a distance, observing. "Wow!" John admired the toys, the books, the canopy bed. "It looks like a real princess's room." "I don't like it that much," Isabella confessed. "It's too neat. Everything perfect. Mom let me make messes." "Then make a mess," John suggested simply. "Dad doesn't like it." That's when Richard entered. "It's okay to make a mess, Isabella. It's your room." She looked at him, surprised. "Your mother was right. Children's rooms should look like children live in them." Richard took a teddy bear from the perfectly organized shelf and tossed it on the bed, out of place. "See? Better like that." Isabella laughed, a sound Richard hadn't heard in years. Later, in the garden, John taught Isabella how to make a daisy chain. Richard watched from the terrace, drinking coffee, when Maria joined him. "He's good for her," Maria said softly. "I know." Richard took a sip. "And that terrifies me. What happens when he decides to leave? When he gets tired of being a rich girl's charity project?" "Sir, with all due respect, you still don't get it." Maria pointed to John and Isabella, now laughing as they tried to balance flowers in their hair. "This isn't charity, it's friendship. And John won't leave because he has nowhere else to go. He'll stay because he cares about her." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I saw him turn down $10,000 to disappear. Money that would have changed his life. And he chose her." Maria looked at Richard. "Now the question is, are you going to choose her too? Because soon you'll have to decide between what society expects and what your daughter needs." Richard knew she was right, and he knew the storm was just beginning. The news leaked on Monday. Richard never knew exactly how. Maybe a subcontracted employee, maybe a nosy neighbor, maybe the same security cameras he had installed for protection now betrayed his privacy. But on Tuesday morning, his secretary entered his office, pale, holding a tablet. "Mr. Davenport, you have to see this." It was a Hollywood gossip blog specializing in celebrity scandals. The headline screamed, "Construction tycoon hosts homeless man in his Beverly Hills mansion." There were photos. John entering the gates, John and Isabella in the garden. And the worst, a photo of them laughing together with a caption that insinuated horrible things. Richard's phone started ringing. First a partner, then another, then investors. "Is this true, Richard? What are you thinking? The press is going to have a field day with this." Richard hung up on all of them, but he knew his world, so carefully constructed, was crumbling. At home, Isabella didn't understand the gravity of the situation. She saw the photos and smiled. "Look, Dad, me and John, we look nice." "Isabella, this is serious." "Why?" Genuine confusion in her eyes. "They're just pictures of friends." How could he explain to a 9-year-old girl about social perception, about reputation, about how the world judged based on appearances? Richard couldn't, so he didn't try. "You're right," he said finally. "They're just pictures of friends." But on Wednesday, the storm worsened. A real newspaper, not just a blog, published a full article. "The Controversial Friendship. When Does Philanthropy Cross the Line?" The article hinted that Richard was using John for public relations, or worse, that there was something inappropriate in the relationship between an adult man and a little girl. Richard felt a burning rage. He called his lawyers. "Sue them, all of them. Defamation, libel, everything." But Isabella heard the conversation through the office door. And when Richard hung up, she entered, determined. "No," she said. "Isabella, they're saying horrible things about John, about you. Then we'll show them the truth." Her eyes shone with conviction. "We'll tell our story, our real story." "How?" Isabella picked up her sketchbook. She opened it to the page where she had written, "John gave me my voice. Show them this. Show everyone. Show that he's good, that he helped me, that he's my friend." Richard looked at his daughter, this child who hadn't spoken for months and was now proposing to take on the entire press. "You want to make a public statement?" She nodded, serious. "For the first time, I want everyone to hear me." And so, that Thursday, Richard organized a press conference, not in a formal office, but in the mansion's garden, Isabella's territory. Reporters swarmed, their cameras ready to capture what they expected to be embarrassing apologies or weak justifications. Instead, they saw a 9-year-old girl walk onto a small stage next to her father. "My name is Isabella Davenport," she began, her voice trembling but clear. "I didn't speak for 4 years, since my mother died." The cameras clicked furiously. "My father tried to help me. Doctors, therapists. They all tried. But I couldn't. She looked at Richard, who nodded to encourage her. Until I met John. She told them everything. The traffic light, the first meeting, how he saw her, really saw her, when no one else could, how he didn't try to fix her, only to accept her. John is my friend, my best friend, and anyone who says bad things about him. She lifted her chin, defiant. Doesn't know me, and doesn't know him. Richard watched, a mixture of pride and awe. His daughter, who had spent years in silence, was facing the world. A reporter raised his hand. Isabella, is your father paying this John to be your friend? No. The answer was quick and indignant. John doesn't want money. He just wants to be good. And he is. But he lives on the street. Isn't that dangerous? Isabella looked directly into the camera. You know what's dangerous? People who judge without knowing. People who see the clothes, not the heart. She touched her chest. John has a heart, bigger than this whole house. Stunned silence. Richard stepped forward. My daughter is speaking for the first time in 4 years, and if you can't see that this is a miracle, that this is beautiful, then I don't know what to say. John is not a scandal, he is a gift, and anyone who tries to hurt him will have to go through me first. The headlines that evening were different. Tycoon defends unusual friendship. This is a miracle. 9-year-old moves nation with statement about homeless friend. The voice of silence. How a homeless man helped a girl speak again. But it wasn't all positive. Conservative investors threatened to pull their capital. Partners questioned Richard's judgment. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. And Richard knew he would have to choose John or the empire, his daughter or his fortune. When Isabella saw the positive headlines, she wrote in her notebook, I'm not afraid anymore. Richard read it and realized his daughter was braver than he had ever been. Maybe it was time to learn from her. Richard made his decision on a Friday morning. He found John in his usual spot, organizing the cardboard that served as his bed. John, I need to make you a proposal. If it's money, it's not money, it's a home. Richard took a deep breath. I want you to live with us. At the mansion. There's a whole guest suite in the back. It was for the old governess. It's yours if you want it. John was frozen. Mr. Davenport, I can't accept. Please. It was the first time Richard had asked for something instead of ordering it. I'm not doing this for charity. I'm doing what's best for Isabella. And you are what's best for her. People will talk. They're already talking. Richard shrugged. But Isabella is talking too, for the first time in years. So, let them talk. John looked around. His territory for 2 years, his makeshift home. Then he looked at the man in front of him, once so proud, now humble. For how long? For as long as you want to stay. And what if Isabella doesn't need me anymore? I think, Richard said carefully, she will always need you. And I think I will too. John nodded slowly. Then I accept. For her. When they arrived at the mansion, Isabella was in the garden with Maria. Seeing John get out of the car with a small bag, all his worldly possessions, she screamed with joy and ran. John, are you going to live here? Yes, little princess, if you want me to. I do. I really do. She took his hand. Come, see your room. The room was simple compared to the rest of the mansion, but to John, it was a palace. A real bed with clean sheets, a private bathroom, a window overlooking the garden. It's a lot, he whispered. It's yours, Isabella corrected, smiling. That first night, they sat down to dinner together. Richard, Isabella, John and Maria, whom Richard insisted join them. We're not boss and employees tonight, he declared. We're family. The word hung in the air. Family. John taught Isabella a lullaby his mother used to sing to him. She tried to follow, stumbling over the words, but laughing at her own mistakes. Again, she would ask every time they messed up. Let's try it. Again. Richard watched, amazed. When was the last time he had heard laughter at this table? Mr. Davenport, John said after dinner. May I ask something? Richard. You can call me Richard. John nodded. Why now? Why did you decide to bring me here? Richard thought. Because my daughter asked me a question. She asked, Dad, do you want me to be happy or to be perfect? And I realized I always wanted both, but she only needs one. And you chose happiness. I chose her, just as she is. Richard looked at Isabella, who was now drawing at the table with colored pencils. Marina would tell me I took too long, but I'm here now. That night, Richard tucked Isabella into bed for the first time in years. She didn't push him away. She let him kiss her forehead, adjust her blanket. "Dad? Yes? Are you happy?" The question surprised him. "Why?" "Because, for the first time, you seem happy. Not just busy. Happy." Richard felt his eyes burn. "You know something? I think I am. Is it because of John? It's because of you. John just helped me see what was in front of me the whole time." Isabella smiled, sleepy. "John is good at that. Helping people. See." Monday dawned heavy. Richard put on his best suit, armor for the battle he knew was coming. Isabella saw him leaving and asked, "Where are you going?" "To an important meeting." "About John?" Richard knelt to be at her level. "About us. About family. About choices." He touched her face gently. "But don't worry. I'm going to make the right choice." The boardroom on the 27th floor of the high-rise was full. 10 partners, 15 investors, 2 lawyers. All looking at Richard as if he were a problem to be solved. Marcelo, the most senior partner, opened the meeting. "Richard, let's get straight to the point. This situation with the homeless man is damaging our image. Clients are reconsidering contracts. Investors are nervous." "How many clients have we lost?" Richard asked calmly. "None yet, but how much money have we lost?" "This isn't about money," another partner interjected. "It's about reputation. You can't have a vagrant living in your house and expect to be taken seriously in the corporate world." "Why not?" Stunned silence. "Why can't I?" Richard repeated. "Because he doesn't have money. Because he lived on the street. Because his life didn't follow the script we consider acceptable." "Richard, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. For the first time in years." Richard stood up. "My daughter hadn't spoken in 4 years. I spent fortunes on treatments. And a man with nothing, no degrees, no credentials, just kindness, did what no specialist could." His voice rose. "So you tell me, who is more valuable? The Harvard neurosurgeon who failed, or the homeless man who succeeded?" "That's not how the world works," Marcelo said coldly. "Then maybe the world needs to change." Another partner slammed the table. "We're giving you an ultimatum, Richard. Either the homeless man goes or you go." "If I have to choose," Richard said slowly and clearly, "I choose Isabella. I choose John. I choose my family." "Then you're fired. We'll vote." The vote was quick, 10-2. Richard Davenport was officially removed from the company he had built from the ground up. He picked up his briefcase, nodded, and left. In the parking garage, he called Maria. "Tell Isabella I'll be home early today. We'll have lunch together." "Sir, how did it?" "Wonderfully badly." And for the first time in decades, Richard Davenport laughed freely. The afternoon headlines were brutal. "Tycoon loses empire for a homeless man." Richard Davenport ousted from his own company after scandal. But by evening, other headlines emerged. "Father chooses daughter over fortune." The tycoon who had the courage to choose. Isabella saw the news. She read the headlines. Her eyes filled with tears. "Dad, you lost everything because of me." Richard pulled her into a tight hug. "I haven't lost anything. I've gained everything. I've gained you. But your company, it was just money, concrete and contracts. You," he pulled her back to look her in the eyes, "are irreplaceable, and so is John. This family, you, me, Maria, John, this is what's real. The rest is just paper." John stood in the doorway, witnessing the scene. "Richard, I can leave." "I don't want you to." "You're not going anywhere," Richard interrupted. "Unless you want to, but if you stay, it's because you choose to. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, out of family." That night, they cooked dinner together. Maria was teaching Isabella how to make rice while John peeled potatoes, and Richard, clumsily but trying, chopped vegetables. "I've never seen you cook," Isabella observed, impressed. "I'm learning a lot of new things." Richard nearly cut his finger. John gently corrected his technique. Humility is the first. They ate late, laughed a lot, and when Isabella went to bed, she murmured, "Best day of my life." Richard was awake in his office, his home office now that he didn't have another, when John appeared with 2 cups of coffee. "Thanks," Richard accepted. "For the coffee or for ruining your life?" John tried to joke. "For saving me from it." Richard took a sip. "I was so focused on building an empire that I forgot to build a home. You reminded me which one is more important." "And now?" "Now?" Richard smiled. "I have enough savings for 3 lifetimes. I have my daughter talking, laughing. I have a real family." He looked at John. "I think I'm going to take a vacation." a long one. See who Richard Davenport is when he's not being a CEO. And what if you don't like what you find? Then I'll ask for help from two specialists in new beginnings. Richard raised his cup in a toast. You and Isabella. 3 months later, life had transformed in ways Richard had never imagined. The mansion, once silent and formal, was now alive. John was tending a vegetable garden, teaching Isabella about patience and growth. Maria was no longer just an employee. She was an official part of the family, with a renovated room and her salary doubled. Because family takes care of family, Richard had declared. And Isabella was flourishing. Her voice, once hesitant, now flowed in complete sentences. She still struggled with some words, still paused to think sometimes, but she talked. She laughed. She sang, off-key but joyfully. She went back to school, not the expensive private one where everyone knew who she was, but a nearby public school John had suggested, where a kid was a kid regardless of their last name. "Dad," she said on the first day, nobody cares. That I used to be mute. I'm just Bella, the new girl." Richard understood. It was a freedom money could never have bought. One day, a reporter showed up at the gate, not for a scandal, but for a human interest story. "Mr. Davenport, 3 months ago you lost billions. Do you have any regrets?" Richard looked out at the garden where Isabella and John were planting tomatoes. "Not a single one. But your company. I built buildings. I created structures that will last for decades, maybe centuries." Richard pointed to his daughter. "But I was destroying the only structure that truly mattered, my family. So yes, I lost money, but I got my daughter back. And if you ask me which one is worth more," he smiled, "there's no comparison." The interview went viral, not as a scandal, but as an inspiration. CEOs began to reconsider their priorities. Fathers saw themselves in Richard's journey, and John became a symbol not of charity, but of human value over social status. Offers came pouring in, TV shows, books, speaking engagements. Richard turned them all down. This isn't a story to be sold. It's a life to be lived. But he accepted one, a social housing project, this time not for profit but for impact. "John," he said one night, "I need your advice." "Mine?" John laughed. "What do I know about construction? But you know about dignity, about what it feels like not to have a roof over your head. I want to build not just shelters, but homes. And I need someone who understands the difference." And so the Star Project was born, a tribute to the metaphor John had used with Isabella. Dignified housing, built with input from those who had experienced homelessness, designed for humanity, not just functionality. Isabella participated in the design. "Gardens," she insisted. "Every building needs to have a garden, so the kids can plant things." On the opening day of the first building, Isabella gave a speech. Her voice, now firm and clear, echoed through the crowded hall. "My name is Isabella Davenport. A year ago I couldn't speak. Today I'm standing here in front of all of you because someone taught me that voices come in many forms, and that sometimes the quietest people have the most important stories to tell." She looked at John, who was in the front row next to Richard and Maria. "John taught me that a home isn't about nice walls or expensive furniture. It's about feeling safe, about having a place where you belong." Isabella pointed to the building behind her, simple but dignified, with gardens blooming at the entrance. "This place was made with love, for people who deserve love, because everyone deserves that." The audience gave a standing ovation. Richard had to discreetly wipe his eyes. After the ceremony, a woman approached John. She was holding a small child. "Are you the John from the story?" she asked timidly. "I am. I was homeless too, for 3 years with my daughter." Tears streamed down her face. "Today I got the keys to my own apartment, a real apartment, and it's because of you, for showing that we're worth something." John hugged her, moved. "You were always worth it. You were just waiting for the world to notice." That night in the mansion that now felt like a real home, they gathered in the living room. Isabella was teaching Maria a new song on the guitar. Richard and John were playing chess, John teaching, Richard learning humility with every defeat. "Checkmate," John announced kindly. "Again." Richard laughed. "How are you so good at this?" "Time. A lot of time on the streets, playing with anyone who passed by." John reset the pieces. "Another game?" "Always." Isabella put her guitar aside and snuggled between the two men on the sofa. "Dad? Are you happy now?" Richard looked around. The living room was no longer just expensive decoration. It was a space filled with life, with laughter, with love. He looked at his daughter, her eyes bright with health and joy. He looked at John, the man who had saved his family without even knowing he was doing it. He looked at Maria, who was humming softly as she organized sheet music. "You know," he said, pulling Isabella closer, "I used to measure happiness in signed contracts, in buildings constructed, in zeros in my bank account. I thought I was happy because I was successful." He kissed the top of her head. "But now I get it. Success is this. It's hearing your voice. It's having John as a friend. It's having Maria as family. It's knowing that when I wake up in the morning, I have people who care about me not for what I own, but for who I am." "So, you're happy?" Isabella insisted. "Immensely." John put a hand on Richard's shoulder. "You know what's funny? I had everything taken from me years ago. I lost my house, my family, my job. I thought I'd never be happy again. But then I met a little princess at a traffic light." He stroked Isabella's hair. "And she gave me a family back. Not just a roof, but a home. So who saved who?" "It was both of you," Richard said. "You saved each other. And in the process, you saved me." Isabella yawned, sleepy. Richard carried her to her room, tucking her into bed as he did every night now. "Dad, will you read me a story?" "Which book do you want?" "The one Mum used to read. The one about the stars." Richard took the worn book from the shelf. "The Little Prince," Marina's favorite story. He hadn't been able to read it since she died, but now he opened to the first page and began. His voice trembled at first, then settled. Isabella listened, her eyes slowly closing. When he finished the chapter, she was already asleep. Before he left, he murmured, "I think you'd be proud of her, Mari, and maybe even of me." In the hallway, he ran into John. "Thank you," Richard said simply. "For what?" "For not giving up on us when it would have been easier to leave. For teaching my daughter that voices matter. For teaching me that success isn't about conquering the world, but about conquering yourself." John smiled. "You're a quick learner for someone so stubborn. I had a good teacher." Epilogue, 5 years later. Isabella was 14 when she stepped onto the stage at TEDx Los Angeles. Her hair was longer, her face showed the features of a teenager, but her eyes, those huge brown eyes, still shone with the same determination. "My name is Isabella Davenport, and for 4 years of my life, I couldn't speak." The auditorium of 2,000 people fell completely silent. Doctors tried to cure me. Therapists tried to fix me. My father tried to buy my voice back. She smiled at Richard in the front row, who smiled back. "But do you know who succeeded? A homeless man named John. And do you know how?" She paused for effect. "He didn't try anything. He just listened." Isabella told her story, not with shame or sadness, but with gratitude and a wisdom beyond her years. "I learned that we can't buy healing. We can't force transformation, but we can create the space for it to happen. We can listen, truly listen, when someone needs to be heard. My father lost his company for choosing me. He lost billions. And do you know what he says about it?" She looked at Richard. "That it was the best deal he ever closed." The audience laughed and applauded. "Today I work with children who can't speak. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. I'm just someone who understands silence. And sometimes that's what we need. Someone who understands, not someone who has all the answers." John still lives with us. He still teaches. He still listens. And every day I am grateful for that traffic light on Sunset Boulevard, for that moment when our eyes met and he didn't see a broken little girl, but a glass princess waiting to shine. Isabella finished with the words John had told her years ago. "Silence is where the voice hides until someone calls to it. And when someone finally calls, when someone truly listens, magic happens." The ovation was deafening. Backstage, John hugged her. "You were incredible, little princess. I learned from the best." Richard joined the hug, and Maria right after. Family, not of blood, but of choice, of love, of presence. "Proud of you," Richard murmured. "Of us," Isabella corrected. "Proud of us. Of who we've become together." And as they left the theater, Isabella looked up at the Los Angeles sky, where a few stars managed to shine through the light pollution. She thought of her mother, hoping that from somewhere Marina was watching, hoping she was proud, and then she thought of all the silent children in the world, waiting for someone to truly listen. "Someday," she said to John, "I want to start a program to connect kids who can't speak with people like you, people who know how to listen." "Then we'll start one," John replied simply. "When do you want to begin?" "Tomorrow," Isabella decided. "Always tomorrow. Because it's never too late to start something important. Richard looked at his daughter, no longer the mute child he had desperately tried to fix, but a confident, eloquent, compassionate young woman, a woman who had transformed her pain into purpose, her silence into strength, and he realized she didn't need fixing. She never had. She just needed to be seen, and finally he had learned how to see. "Home?" Maria asked. "Home," they all agreed, and together, this unlikely but perfect family went back to the home they had built not with money or status, but with something far more valuable: unconditional love, genuine acceptance, and the courage to choose people over everything else, because in the end, that's what saved them all. Not the doctors or the therapies, not the fortune or the fame. Simply the powerful, transformative choice to truly see and hear one another. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's all we need to find our voice and our way back home.